India, led by the Honorable Chief Election Commissioner, has assumed the chairship of the Council of Member States of International IDEA for 2026, with IIIDEM as the nodal agency. The overarching theme of the chairship is democracy for an inclusive, peaceful, resilient, and sustainable world. The chairship will be divided yet interconnected into two thematic pillars, one of which is reimagining democracy for the future and independent and professional election management bodies for sustainable democracy. Under the two thematic pillars, India has identified 43 interconnected thematic areas, 7 of which will be seen in the form of global roadmaps, policy briefs, and knowledge tools, 11 of which will be in the form of model international electoral standards, one of its kind. 25 will be in the form of global best practices and innovations in electoral processes. Well, I'll skip this slide because we are living and experiencing the international conference right now. And I'll just go to the brief introduction of the presentation, which is Democracy for Peaceful Coexistence Amidst Diversity. Well, inclusive democratic governance fosters peaceful coexistence in diverse society through power sharing, minority rights protection, and participatory institutions. Transparent systems, independent judiciaries, and community dialogue reduces tensions and integrate marginalized groups. We now plan to see how real-world examples demonstrate how responsive democratic practices transform this diversity into stability, belongingness, and shared progress. With this, let me introduce you to the moderator and speakers of the session. We have Dr. Lal Rosama, the Chief Electoral Officer of Mizoram, who will be moderating the session. We have Ms. Ethel Rothangpuri, the Joint Chief Electoral Officer of Mizoram, as one of our speakers. Mr. Samshir Ali, the Chairman of OKB Suriname, will again provide us insights to the theme. Professor Ayang Bamsham Kishore, Head of Department of Political Science, will also provide his insights. We have Professor Dongal, from Department of Political Science, Mizoram University, to give his perspective. And lastly, we have Dr. Shweta Singh from the South Asian University to provide her insights on the theme. Thank you. Sir, may I now call you on to lead the session?
Thank you, Losna. Once again, good morning to you all and welcome you to the session. As I said, we have heard this gathering. The topic is democracy for peaceful coexistence amidst diversity. In fact, we are running short of time. We are supposed to start 15 minutes back, and allotted time is still 1:15. I would like to mention here that at 1:15 there is another important meeting with all the foreign delegates and CEOs. So as we progress, we will see how we could manage. I request the speakers also to be more stricter in management of our allotted time. We are allotted 10 minutes each, so we will try our best to stick to that limited time. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speakers, 50 minutes, and then that will be followed by the questions and answers. And then ultimately, if in the opening session also, it has been narrated that India has assumed the chairship of the international IDEA. Our very honorable Chief Electoral Election Commissioner, Sri Gyanesh Kumarji, has assumed the chairmanship of this international IDEA, Council of States in the International Institute of IDEA. So in that assumption of the chairship, it was announced by our respected CEC that India's chairship will be decisive, ambitious, and action-oriented. The chairship was assumed in December, and I'm very happy that the Election Commission of India and the IIIDEM of India and the International IDEA are organizing this wonderful international conference, and I'm happy that we could be a part of it. I thank the ECI, I thank the IIIDEM, and I thank the International IDEA also. As we have heard, the topic is like that, and we know that this contemporary society is marked by diversity, ethnic, linguistic, religious, ideas, and all those differences plus democratic governance is true power holding in the government. So parties are competing with one another to gain that power. So diversity could be in various ways. So now today we will have an engagement and discussions how democracy can sustain harmony and mutual respect and serve as a foundation for peaceful coexistence in these diverse plural societies. I encourage all the speakers to engage themselves and express their insights and ideas freely. And at the same time also, along with the speakers, I request the participants also to participate and at the same time respect diverse viewpoints which may come up during the session. With that, Losna ma'am, is there a particular sequence being set and informed to the speakers? If it is so, I will follow that. Otherwise, I can go as I. All right. So first of all, yes. I'm sorry, this is not readily available with me. Now the first presentations will be by Mr. Shamsir Ali Sheikh Alibaks. As we have heard, he is the chairman of the OKB Suriname. Sir, the podium is, I will hand the podium to you, and the allotted time is 10 minutes.
This one is another.
We need to replace this.
No.
Okay.
Respected ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I have been allotted this this theme, Democracy for Peaceful Coexistence Amidst Diversity, and I will take you in a journey to the lessons that we have learned from Suriname, the country where I am living. I will, for the sake of time, I will try to scroll by the slides and while telling the story about the lessons from Suriname so that we can gain some time. I have put two questions here. We are here in a gathering, in a meeting room. How many languages are spoken in this room? And how many identities does one person carry at the same time? In my country, Suriname, a child can greet their mother in Sranantongo, that is a local language, pray in Arabic, sing a bhajan in Hindi, celebrate Phagua, Eid or Christmas, Easter, sometimes all in the same month, and still feels fully Surinamese. This is not confusion. What we say, this is democracy in motion. And democracy in motion means a society where diversity works, identity identities coexist and change is managed peacefully. Suriname is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural country, and is often portrayed as a risk to stability. If we look at the country itself and the society, the diversity that we have in the society, then there are several persons that who think that the diversity might be a risk for the stability of the country. However, the Surinamese practice has shown and proved that it is the opposite. The real danger is when diversity has no democratic channel. In essence, democracy does not eliminate conflicts, it civilizes it by turning this agreement into shared non-violent process. It is very clear from the perspective of Suriname that differences in opinions, in beliefs, in identities, or in interests are inevitable in any diverse society. We are living together. Everyone has their own culture, different beliefs, different way of thinking. But democracy transforms these differences into dialogue, debate, vote, negotiation, and law instead of violence. It provides agreed upon rules that allow people to disagree without becoming enemies. Democratic institutions as EMBs and the courts, they have a very great function in the society. When these institutions functions well and properly, then grievances are spoken, competitions becomes political, and identity becomes representation. The lessons that we have learned from Suriname is that democracy has constantly encouraged us to have a coalition and encourage coalition politics, a politics system that is combined with different political parties, with different ethnic groups, with different religious groups, etc. No single group governs the country alone. We have always a government with different political parties in a coalition. And that is one of the reasons for the stability in the country. And this has created a culture of negotiation, a political incentives for moderation and inclusion over domination. Democracy here did not erase differences because the differences will remain, but it managed it. Second lesson that we have learned from our country is that independent institutions matters. If the courts, if the EMB is independent, then, and they are trustworthy, then these oversight bodies will function as neutral referees, as early warnings in the system, and will dampen the conflicts that could arise. And when citizens trust the elections, that the elections are credible, they will accept also the outcomes of the elections, even if those results are not in favor of them. Disagreement is normal, but solutions are reached by talking, bargaining, and finding a middle ground for each other. Democracy transforms conflicts into negotiation, rewards moderation, and priorities inclusion instead of domination. In Suriname, community consultation, religious tolerance, and local governance forms have played a quiet but crucial role in diffusing tensions, building social trust, and creating shared civic identity. Democracy, that is why we say democracy works best when people see themselves reflected in it. They will recognize themselves in the democracy. What we can learn from the Surinamese lessons are 5 that I have put on the slide, in the slide. Inclusive electoral systems reduce zero-sum politics. Second, independent EMBs are peace infrastructure. Coalition governance encourages dialogue across identity lines, and transparency prevents grievances from becoming myths. Participation builds ownership, and ownership builds peace. Democracy does not eliminate conflicts, it civilizes it, as I have already said. The conclusion that we can draw from the case of Suriname is that the democracy can be peaceful and can have a peaceful coexistence when there are fair rules in the society. In diverse societies, democracy is not a luxury; it is a necessity. It would not be perfect, maybe not easy, but profoundly human. From Suriname to India, from small states to larger democracies, the lesson is clear. When people are hurt, they don't need to shout. When they are represented, they do not need to resist. And when democracy works, diversity becomes strength, not threat. Thank you.
Now we'll proceed to the next speaker. Thank you to Samsidali Sheikh Alibax for your insightful presentation. Now may I call Ayang Bam Singh Siam Kisor.
Thank you, Chair, and a very good afternoon to all, ladies and gentlemen. We heard the story from the Suriname, and let me talk a little bit about more. As we all know, the world is diverse. It's a plural society everywhere, almost everywhere. So there are different mechanisms. One of the mechanisms which is practiced by many of the countries is through federalism. In the countries like India, we try to practice not only through federalism, but also through electoral means in order to live peacefully. It's basically because if we manage the diversity, if we fail to manage diversity properly, then there is a good chance for conflict and instability that we have witnessed in different parts of the world. If you see the neighboring countries, or if I'm allowed to say, like say in the South Asia, there are issues on the peace because of diversity. So why this theme matters is basically because we have to learn to manage, or we have to manage the diversity through democratic elections, so that every individual or every citizen can get the opportunity to choose their own leaders in a free and fair manner. For that, we have different stakeholders. The first and most important is the electoral management body, political parties, civil society organizations, and media, and also you and me, the voters. Then comes to the how we are going to manage. The first thing, we need to have a constitutional provisions. When I say constitutional provision, I mean not only just the electoral the election management body, but also we need to address the diversity related issues in the representations, which is very, very important. Then when we talk about the strengthening, I'm not talking about just the number. I'm talking about the inclusivity in the election management body. When the government appoint the election management body, we have to realize, we have to think the diversity of that particular political system. That is very, very important. When I say inclusivity, it's not only the diversity, even the gender sensitivity also is very, very important. Because we have seen in different countries, including India, when we appoint the election commissions, we hardly see the ladies or the gender sensitivity is not considered so much. That also we have to think of. We cannot run the system only from the patriarchal society. We have to look in a very, very inclusive manner. Then coming to the inclusivity in the electoral cycle, it's not only the during election, but also before and after. Say, for example, when we talk about the delimitations of constituency, say we have around, say, 6, 7 chair. Let's assume that this is a constituency. We are supposed to add 2 more. Then how we are going to adjust the people? We have to accommodate every section. Rather, we have to think the minority, the tribal community who are not represented in that have to be considered very, very seriously. That is what I call is delimitation of constituencies should be taken very, very seriously. Then coming to the registering of voters, you know, we all doing the registers, voters and everything, but you know, there are areas where we have to think very seriously when it comes to the registration of voters. We should not allow not even a single voters to be left out, particularly from the ethnic minority communities or the tribal community should not be left out in any manner. Not only, as I'm saying, even in the cities also, say the slum dwellers, we cannot let them out. Or in the far-flung areas or the tribal community, which is far away from the countries like India, which is from, say, for example, Ladakh to Kanyakumari or from Gujarat to Mizoram, you have to think the border people, how we can incorporate, how we can bring them properly in the voters' days. Then another thing we have to think about how to educate them. In India, we are doing fairly well regarding this issue. Say we have the systematic voters education and electoral participation. We're doing very well through that. But at the same time, we also have to give emphasis to the tribal communities, the socially disadvantaged group, through different channels. It may be through educational institutions, it may be through civil society organizations, or it may be through self-help group. Depending on the context, depending on the situation on the ground, we have to use the advantageous positions so that every individual is aware of a kind of political socialization. We have to think of this political socialization by every individual in the country. That is very, very crucial. Then when it comes to the campaigning, very often all over the country, we come to know, or we heard, and then we see, we witness that when it comes to the campaigning, always in order to win voters, we always some kind of say discriminations to a particular community or particular religious community or ethnic communities that have to be regulated fairly properly. Then coming on the, say, on the day of polling, the minority communities, it may be the religion, it may be the religious minority community, ethnic community, or maybe even women or whoever it is, they should feel free to come out and cast a vote. Nobody should be have a sense of this fear of favor. We should allow them a peaceful elections on the polling day. That have to be regulated properly. Then same thing on the day of the say counting. We have come across in different parts of the world that the election agents or the counting agents, because of a particular community, because of particular say political party representing a particular community, there are sometimes we come across the discriminations of this nature. So we have to be very, very careful about this. Then how we're going to channelize all this? I argue here that we have to channelize particularly through political party. It's basically because democracy runs through political party, whether we like it or not. I may not like it, the political party, but we cannot run away from political party. So it's high time we regulate the political party. Why? Political party have to comply with the rules. The law of the land have to be, and particularly by the election management body. So for example, in India, we have the model code of conduct before every elections. Say no party or candidate shall include in any activity which may aggravate existing differences or create mutual hatred or cause tension between different caste, community, linguistic, or religious. And again, we should not use the religious platform in order to gain vote or in order to divide the society. Here is where I come just beyond what the previous speaker talked about. For me, it's about, when we talk about the neutrality of the election management body, we also have to think very seriously about the public confidence. It's not only independent. I want the election management body to be a fourth branch of the government. As we all know, we have three organs of government. We have to think and we have to rethink, or we have to look very, very seriously about this election management body, whether we can look at it, whether we can put it, whether we can say, give more power so that they have more independence. Here we talk about independent, but how many countries are having real independence in the true sense of the term when it comes to the election management body? India is fairly doing very, very good, but there are rooms for improvement. Thank you. Then another thing, say like countries like say Malaysia. In Malaysia, according to the Article 114 Clause 2, when they appoint any say election commissions, they also consider the public confidence by the state authority. When they appoint, they also have to consider the public confidence in it. It's basically because we have witnessed all over the world the losing of the public confidence in the election management body. We need to win back. It's very, very important to win back the confidence of the election management body. Then how we're going to go ahead. As we have witnessed everywhere, almost everywhere, even though, as I said, some countries are doing fairly better, but in order to minimize all this kind of electoral conflict or the disputes, particularly because of the, say, diversity, in order to minimize, we have to think about the electoral integrity. When I say electoral integrity, I mean the democratic principles, use of democratic principles like they say universal adult franchise, political equality. Then the election management body should be professional, impartial, transparent throughout the electoral cycle. Plus, the role of the judiciary is very, very crucial. Not only to deliver justice, but also have to look or have to be realize that the justice are delivered. So here I come off some of my observations and the way forward. If we have to live, because we have to live in this plural society, whether we like it or not, so we have to manage the diversity through democratic elections. And for that, we need to have a constitutional mechanism. And when I say constitutional mechanism, as I'm saying, I want the election management body to be more empowered so that they can be considered as the fourth branch of the government. This is the way forward for me. We need to look very seriously the institutions, the election management body, so that the diversity, the issues in the society can be managed better. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor C.M. Kishore, for enlightening us. Now we will move to the next speaker. I will call upon Professor J. Dongel to come up to the podium for this presentation.
I will be deliberating on democracy for peaceful coexistence amidst diversity. Okay. What is democracy? The state where free society is realized, it is known as democratic state. And Shelley says, quote, democracy is a government in which everyone has a say. And in SDGs 10.2, it is emphasized that empowerment should be there irrespective of race, ethnicity, origin, and religion. And this can be achieved through election. So in this regard, EMBs and election practitioners have great role so that in the democratic process, election can be conducted with fair and free means starting from vote registration. And now we'll move to the second. So, democracy successfully functions where diversity coexists peacefully. And there are varieties of electoral systems, varieties of governmental system, and party system. But if diversity coexists, in spite of these diversities, democracy can function successfully. And if various diversities are not accommodated, insecurity surface in democratic system, which affect the working of EMBs, political parties, voters, medias, and even other stakeholders. And in this regard, India has a unique system of unity in diversity. Indian political system is based on unity and diversity starting from ancient time. And even now, if this unity in diversity is properly maintained, Indian Union will go on. But if it is not maintained properly, if monoculture, mono-language, mono-religion is emphasized, there will be threat for Indian unity also. The same with electoral system and global trends. So every ideologies, they claim that they are democratic. Even communism, Nazism, fascism, and other extreme ideologies also, they claim that they are democrats. They are democrats. And Greek political philosopher Aristotle said, man is by nature a social and political animal. He who can live himself may either be a beast or God. So all normal human beings, they need the cooperation of others. And a social animal, in this modern time, democracy is regarded as the best governance for normal human beings. And out of three democracies, out of the democratic system, there are three model democracies: United Kingdom, USA, and India. Why? Because United Kingdom, as we know, it is the mother of parliamentary democracy, which follows parliamentary system on hereditary royal system. Then United States of America, it is the starter of presidential system, federal system, where there are 50 states, which all the 50 states have different constitution. And India combines both the United Kingdom and United States system. And all these three systems, they accommodate multiculturalism and diversities. And failure of democracies in many countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America is due to this failure of maintaining multiculturalism and diversities. And why democracy functions successfully in many countries? Because of maintenance of these diversities. So in these regards, EMBs and other stakeholders, they have great role to play. Then model standard, functioning of EMBs should not only be fair, but should appear to be fair. When I was serving in college before I joined university, we attended election training many a time. Then what was taught? Your performance should not only be fair, but should appear to be fair. Likewise, many EMBs also, they are independent and autonomous, like ECI under Article 3 to 4 of the Constitution of India. And I should say that the credit should go to the no-nonsense IIIDEM Session. From his time, ECI function as per the constitutional norms. But in United States, they do not have integrate EMB like we have in India, because all the 50 states, they have their own separate constitution. In this regard, EMB should prioritize their constitutional status, and they should function their constitutional status properly. Then best practices of EMB. Constitutional status of EMBs in different countries are not the same, but they are all given independent functioning. And in this regard, these EMBs should not be dictated by the three organs of government: legislative, executive, and judiciary. As my colleague has already mentioned, this election conducting body, it is the fourth state, also to say the fourth organ of government. In that regard, the functions should be done properly. Now, let me be a bit brief so that I may be able to maintain my timing. State experience of EMB. In India, as we know, ECI is the integrated EMB, and under Section 13A of RPA 1950, CEO have been appointed in different states, and under Section 20A of RPA 1951, DOs have been appointed. But this ECI, it is entrusted only with conduct of election to president, vice president, both houses of parliament, and both houses of the state legislature. But for local bodies, different EMB has been conducted in the state level under Article 243K as per the 73rd Amendment Act of 1992, known as State Election Commissioner, SEC, which conduct the local bodies. And now, so if laws are effectively enforced, election process should function normally. But when laws are not enforced properly, there will be many complaints. And with regard to these model standards, there shall be no flow in election process starting from registration of voters till declaration of result. In this regard, EMBs in different countries, as independent body, they should not be dictated by the three organs of government. In that regard, capacity buildings of those staff involved, employed by EMB, and those officials of EMB are required. And now I'll go to the state specific. For example, EMB should standardize their process. And in that regard, these non-state actors are very important. I would like to bring you to Mizoram in this regard. In Mizoram, the role of non-state actors have been recognized from before. Non-state actor means churches, civil societies, and other bodies. For example, Mizoram Koran Roitu Committee was formed way back earlier, even during insurgency. And it played a lot of role in the performance of election or in conduct of election. And this Mizoram Koran Roitu Committee, MKHC, means like Mizoram Church Coordinating Committee. And from the platform of this MKHC, in every election, appeal has been made to the people. As good citizens, they should cast their votes. And as good Christian, they should be faithful to the government and to the state. And likewise, different church associations like Presbyterian, Baptist Church of Mizoram, Salvation Army, and others also, they issued. And not only that, even civil societies like YMA and others also, they appeal to the public to cast their vote. And in that regard, like Mizoram People Forum, many of you may have heard it. In 2006, it was formed. And this is a body formed by churches and civil society. And Mizoram, this church, MPF, it is based on Model Code of Conduct of the ECI and on the basis of Bible verse. So in this regard, in 2018, let me give you one example. I'll not mention the name. One CEO did not work properly with civil societies, so election was about to be disrupted. Then ECI changed the CEO, and after the new CEO come, the new CEO utilized the non-state civil societies, non-state actors, then election was conducted successfully. So for success of democracy, diversity should be maintained. And in this regard, in the case of India also, yes, Indian political system is based on unity and diversity. So long as this unity and diversity is maintained properly, EMD should also function properly. Indian Union also will flourish. But once this unity and diversity is encroached or is violated, then it is doubtful for Indian Union also to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dongel. I know it's tough on the speakers to confine themselves within this limited time. Plenty of things to be said, but I thank all the three speakers for sticking to your time. Average, we are using 10 minutes, exact 10 minutes. The treat, I really appreciate that. I really thank you, but it's really tough on my side also to regulate all the resourceful speakers to limit themselves within this allotted time. So much has been said now, important issues has been raised, the importance of the constitutional safeguards and the role of the EMBs, the autonomy which they have to have, and the need for strengthening the EMBs. Lots have to be said, but let us hope that going and sticking to the time from the speakers, we will have enough room for discussions later on. Now, may I invite Dr. Sweta Singh for her presentation, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, ECI, IIDEM, and IDEA for actually spearheading this conference and having this very timely conference. Now, where do I start the story and where do I come in from? I see a room full of practitioners, officers, academics, and I come in here as an academic practitioner. And I do not come from the sphere of political science per se, but I come in here as an international relations scholar. And I thought when we are having this conversation on inclusivity and the idea of democracy, for me, what strikes, and I thought I would foreground in today's conversation, is the whole context of gender. And how do we start to really have these conversations in the context of normative intersections at national, at regional, and at international levels. And I thought I'll begin the story, or I'll foreground my ideas in the context of the normative framework, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which was adopted in the year 2000. And why do you think it's important for us to bring that in conversations on inclusivity and democracy? So in that context, I thought I'm going to put this map up for everyone to see. This is the Global Peace Index 2025. And if you look at this very carefully, and I'm coming in the context of South Asia, if you look at this very carefully, you'll see many of the red regions are actually foregrounded in the context of South Asia. You could see Afghanistan, you could see parts, in the context of Pakistan, you could see, regions in South Asia. And what is this really indicating towards? These are not signs of interstate armed conflict. These are regions of intrastate armed conflict. And I think this is particularly important for us to pay attention to, since we are talking about election management processes, we are talking about electoral practices, we are talking about democratic governance. I think it's important for us to pay attention to also the changing nature of conflict and what would post-conflict governance look like in certain contexts. So in this context, if you're looking at the research around, there is a shift in the nature of conflict post-1990s from interstate to intrastate armed conflict. And with this shift in conflict, what is also happening is that there is a blurring of lines. So if you look at the nature of conflicts, it's not just about physical, it's not that you're going to see violence physically. There is a blurring of line between public and private. There is a blurring of line between state and non-state. And you also see a blurring of line in the context of conflicts between organized crime, large-scale human rights violations, and also in the context of the nature of the actors that we were talking about. When we were having this conversation, one of my panelists talked about the role of non-state actors. Now, how do you actually bring that into conversation? And why do you think this becomes important for us? So what I'm emphasizing is that as practitioners, as government officials, as scholars, we need to pay attention to this changing nature of conflict. And when we are talking about this changing nature of conflict, a key indicator for us in the context of inclusivity would be foregrounding and spearheading conversations on gender. We cannot talk about inclusivity without bringing in the category of gender. Now, if you look at gender and you look at the intersections in the context of this changing nature of conflict, you would have to pay attention to what has been classified in the literature as a continuum of war and violence. So when I say one of the key recognitions that comes in from global normative frameworks as well as national policy frameworks is that conflict impacts men and women differently. All right. And it took many years. It was, in fact, after many years of activism, that only for the first time in the year 2000, the United Nations recognized the whole context of that conflict impacts men and women differently. And also that women are not just victims of war and violence, women can also be perpetrators of war and violence. So, breaking through the categories of binaries that we are talking about. At the same time, there was also recognition and realization that where are the women in the context of the participation indexes that we are talking about, be it democratic representation, be it in the context of post-conflict negotiated agreements that we are talking about, where are the women? So the key thing that we are also bringing in is the key category of participation that we are talking about. Now, in that context, as I said, that, when you're looking about inclusivity, one of the things that as practitioners we might want to pay attention to is the whole context of conflict analysis and the category of violence. So when I say that, you cannot look at the category of violence only in the context of physical violence, we need to pay attention to structural and cultural forms of violence. When I say structure, laws, institutions can be also a context for perpetrating violence. So how is it that we are addressing this in the context of the mapping that we are doing? Cultural modes of violence, for instance, foregrounding an intersectional constellation, caste, class, religion, region that we are talking about in mapping the context of violence. And I think that's important in terms of bringing on the idea of reflexivity, the idea of inclusivity that we are talking about. So I think something that I would just nudge you gently to think about is the whole context of post-conflict governance. And I'm not talking just about post-war governance, because there is this, I would say blurring in the context of conflict as well as war. When I say post-war, not essentially mechanisms of justice stand addressed or accountability stand addressed. But when we are talking about post-conflict, democratic indicators would be an important indicator in the context of post-conflict governance mechanisms. And there's a lot of conversations that, for instance, IIDEA has had on this context in different parts of the world, in the context of best practices. So my key question, why is this important when we are thinking about the architecture of post-conflict governance? Why am I drawing your attention to the context of gendered continuum of violence? I think this is important because in a post-conflict context, as I said, you need to start looking at contexts of that there is not a neat transition from situations of war and violence to situations of peace. There is a continuum of militarism, militarization that we are talking about, security and insecurity. So you could talk about equal representation, equal participation, but how is it that you ensure a climate for a woman to come out and vote in that context? So in that sense, I think where I am now, steering the conversation is, I think we need to pay attention to global normative frameworks that exist and that have been translated by differing country contexts. So if you're looking at South Asia, while India does not have a national action plan, many of the other South Asian countries have a national action plan. For instance, there is Nepal, there is Bangladesh, there is Sri Lanka, there is Afghanistan. It's interesting how the national action plan in Afghanistan translated post-Taliban. But what India definitely has done, and what India takes a leadership in, is the whole context of both participation and prevention. So while it is not a signatory in the context of UNHCR 1325, it foregrounds the 4 normative pillars of the United Nations Security Council resolution. So we've seen that in the context of participation of a women's contingent, in the context of peacekeeping. We are looking at it in the context of the electoral quotas, gender sensitivity that the Election Commission foregrounds. So there is a lot that we are doing in the context of translation of this global normative framework. But where is it that we can also nudge this in the context of best practices across the world? I think just in terms of the orientation in the context of the global normative framework, as I said, it was in the year 2000, the United Nations Security Council formally acknowledged the creation of resolution, the adoption of resolution 1325, and acknowledged the changing nature of conflict. There was a recognition of women's agency for peace building. So when we are talking about inclusivity, when we are talking about the whole context of democratic norms for inclusivity and peace building, I think there is a need to recognize women as agents for peace building. In that context, I just wanted to put out a few figures for you to look at. If you're looking at post-conflict governance mechanisms, or in the context of agreements that are negotiated across the world, you would see that between 1992 and 2019, women were on average just 13% of negotiators, and 6% of mediators, and 6% of signatories in major peace processes. About 7 out of every 10 peace process did not include any women mediator or women signatories. It just talks about the context of gaps that we are talking about. Also, another interesting point for us to just look at and interrogate is, in many cases where we've not had women as part of the post-electoral processes or the governance framework or as part of negotiated agreements have gone back and contexts have gone back to situation of violent conflict 5 years within the signing of those agreements. And there's credible research in that context. So gender sensitivity and gender inclusivity are important normative indicators for us to push for, to nudge for. And it'll be interesting to see in different country contexts, what are the best practices in the context of the transformative gender norms that we are talking in terms of the electoral processes. Yes, please. So in that context, as I said, there are the 4 Ps. I'm not going to go into the details of the 4 Ps, but the 4 Ps that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 foregrounds is protection, prevention, relief and recovery, and participation. The question, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 is actually part of a body of larger framework of normative frameworks, which is also classified as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Now, why is it that the Women, Peace and Security Agenda is important for us to think about in the context of IDEA, IIIDEM, and ECI intersections? I would say rethink the whole context of gender inclusive, transformative frameworks for policy and action. And this is extremely important for us to actually foreground in many of the sessions that we are talking about. We don't bring gender and just mix it up, but we foreground and mainstream gender in our conversations. Having said that, it's not that global normative frameworks are without tensions. And in that context, I could just bring in the example of Afghanistan. Interestingly, Afghanistan had a national action plan, all right, and it had adopted a national action plan. We know what the context is in the context of right now, gender, literally a context of gender apartheid. But if you're looking at the whole context of translation of global normative frameworks, why I'm bringing in the case of Afghanistan is also to pay attention to local indicators which can act as inhibitors for translation of the global normative framework. So for instance, in the context of Afghanistan, when we were looking at the whole context of gender quotas and many women who were who were elected to representative bodies, there's a practice called the Mehram, where the woman has to be accompanied by a male accompaniment to travel, for instance, to the provinces. Now you have a global normative framework, you have a national policy legislation, you have a constitutional safeguard, but there are the local and cultural practices, for instance, the Pashtun Wali law or the Sharia law, which create this hindrance in the context of intersections of differing kinds of laws that exist locally. So in that context, I would just say and push or nudge to think about why is it that the women, peace and security agenda is important for us when we are thinking about inclusivity and democratic norms. And I think this is, when we are thinking about this, what I would foreground and lead the thought with is an intersectional analysis and an intersectional mapping across the country context that we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you for your insightful reflections, Dr. Sweta Singh. Now we still have about 18 minutes. I'll call upon Mrs. Ethel Rothangpui for your presentation, please.
Good morning, everybody. Let me start this presentation with the thing that I first learned in school about democracy. I think perhaps many of you also did the same, that democracy is a form of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, that is famously quoted by Abraham Lincoln. So, India being the biggest democratic country, with about 1.5 billion population, is a melting pot of diversity. When the visitors to India think of India, the things that come into their mind may be people with brown or whitish skin, saris, Hindus, Muslims, masala. But then look at me, I have yellow skin, and in my region, we don't even know how to tie a sari, and our cuisine is very bland without masala. So I can rightly say that India is a melting pot of diversity, and it is a place where Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Christians, and also and varieties of all, let me say, all the religions of this world live peacefully. And having said that, I'm proud to say that India is the best example that manages assortment of people amicably. It is with a great pleasure to address this session where theme lies at the core of modern political life, the relationship between democracy and diversity, and how democracy as a political system offers institutional mechanism for peaceful coexistence within shared constitutional framework. In a plural society marked by different diversities, the challenge before governance is not only in managing it, but ensuring that diversity becomes a source of strength rather than conflict. Okay. Diversity today is an intrinsic feature of modern society, and that manifests in multiple dimensions such as ethnic, religious, linguistic, and cultural differences. While diversity enriches social life and collective knowledge, it also poses governance challenges if not institutionally managed. Unaddressed diversity can generate social tensions, political instability, and identity-based conflict. Democratic governance becomes crucial here, as it seeks not to suppress diversity, but to regulate and harmonize it through inclusive political processes and constitutional safeguards. So let us see democracy in theoretical perspective. Actually, to achieve a peaceful coexistence, I'm highlighting how India achieved this peaceful, highlighting the framework of Indian system. So Now, the next one is the theoretical aspect of democracy. Democracy is grounded in political equality, participation, accountability, and constitutionalism. In a plural society, democracy operates through the principle of pluralism, the recognition that multiple identities and interests are legitimate and must coexist within a political system. Democracies acknowledge that conflict is inevitable, but crucially, they also provide institutionalized mechanisms such as elections, legislatures, courts to manage conflict through dialogue, negotiation, and compromise rather than coercion or violence. So, equality before law and inclusive citizenship. So, equality before law is a fundamental principle of democratic governance. It ensures that no group is institutionally privileged or marginalized. Let me highlight how this is addressed in the Indian context. Article 14 and 15 of the Indian Constitution guarantee equality before law and prohibit discrimination on ground of religion, race, sex, or place of birth. These provisions have played a stabilizing role by offering legal remedies to the marginalized communities and strengthening trust in the constitutional processes, even during social tension. Article 14 and 15 are the key to right to equality, with Article 14 ensuring equality before law for all persons, meaning that no one is above law, while Article 15 prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, and place of birth. So, political representation and participation. Political representation is central to democratic coexistence in diverse societies, and elections serve as primary institutional mechanism through which representation realized. By providing regular, competitive, and rule-bound opportunities for political participation, election allows diverse social groups to express their preferences, articulate grievances, and seek redress within constitutional frameworks rather than through extra-legal or violent means. In the Indian context, the electoral system has functioned as crucial integrative device. We have reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in elected legislature have ensured that historically marginalized communities are incorporated in the formation of political process. Electoral participation has thus transformed social exclusion into political engagement, strengthening the legitimacy of democratic institutions. And so the Indian Constitution fundamentally protects the rights of minority and safeguards it. In fact, fundamental rights form the ethical core of democratic system. They protect individual liberties while also safeguarding the collective cultural and religious identities. In India, Article 25 to 30 guarantee freedom of religion and protect the rights of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. We even have a reservation for the minorities in the educational institution. This safeguards enable diverse communities to preserve their identity within a unified political framework, thereby preventing assimilationist pressures and promoting peaceful coexistence. And now the rule of law and democratic conflict resolution. Supremacy of law ensures that conflicts are resolved through institutional mechanism over coercion. Independent judiciaries such as the Supreme Court for neutral arbitration, judicial intervention reinforces and enhances public trust. And federal structure is also an essential part of maintaining a peaceful coexistence amongst the diversity. And decentralization reduces center-periphery tension and accommodates linguistic and cultural aspirations. And also India, one of the reasons why we have conducted successful elections and in the midst of diversity is, I must credit election Commission of India that has been constituted under Article 234 of the Indian Constitution. And we have a length of varieties and of manuals, acts, rules, and guidelines. And this election commission is given a full autonomy to ensure electoral integrity. And also, apart from these rules, acts, manuals, guidelines, I must say that I say it's a kind of instruction, not an order. The MCC, Model Code of Conduct, as a previous speaker, Mr. Dongel, has already highlighted it. I wouldn't delve deep into that, how the Moral Code of Conduct works. In Mizoram, where I come from, that is the state where I come from, enforcement, okay, enforcement of MCC is, let's say, it's best practice. I must say that we showcase this as a best practice, and we are also even going to get a prize for best implementation of Model Code of Conduct. I think we achieved this one through by invoking the will of the people and creating the awareness among the voters and the politicians. So, in conclusion, democracy does not eliminate social conflict. Rather, it transforms conflict into institutionalized dialogue and negotiation through constitutional equality, political representation, fundamental rights, rule of law, federalism, and credible elections. Democracy provides a sustainable framework for peaceful coexistence amidst diversity, and democracy remains the most effective pathway to social stability in diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Settle, you may take this seat, please. You may take this, please. Take this seat. Now, I believe the floor is also eager to participate. Such a broad, interesting topic we have. So much dimension also. Since we are running out of time, some of the dignitaries and also even the speaker, one of our speakers have to leave. So such is the situations we have here. I request the floor to participate now. We will open the floor for questions and answers, and if needed, you may chip in for your own observations also. Madam Lochna will, no, mic is with me. It is fine.
You could use the mic.
All right.
For the recording.
Oh, yeah, it's being recorded. No? Sorry. Yeah. So we open the floor for comments and questions.
I'm Lalit from Election Commission. My question is to Shweta ma'am. Ma'am, could you please? Hello. Could you please just sum up your presentation in some specific the interventions which you want from the election management bodies?
I think one of the things where I was coming in from was in the context of post-conflict governance architecture, all right? But in the context of post-conflict governance architecture, in the context of national legislations, what is pushed for is, for instance, gender quotas in the context of representation. That's one part of the story, the procedural aspect. The second aspect of the story is in the context of security mechanisms that we are talking about. So for instance, in zones which are situations of conflict or violence, what kind of mapping is done before an election, during the process of election, and after an election? So, you know, the whole context of conflict analysis or conflict mapping that we are talking about. So in the context of the interactions, if I would say, for instance, how is it that the global normative framework comes handy for us? There are 4 P's specifically that is being talked about: participation, peace building, prevention, relief, and reconstruction. And across these 4 P's, how is it that we are foregrounding the whole context of gender in the context? So what, for instance, are electoral bodies doing across, not just in India, but across? How is it being translated? So as I gave you the example in one of the contexts, like in a post-conflict society like Afghanistan, one of the mechanisms that was put in place was gender quotas. In many of the contexts, it's security mechanisms. It is also, international monitoring mechanisms in situations of conflict. So I think the key word here is context. How do you analyze the context, and then how do you translate the 4 Ps that we are talking about?
Hello, I'm Dr. Nagendra. I'm an NLMT from Karnataka. My question to Professor Dongil, which you have referred the non-state actors in the election process. So you all know the Indian case is, India is such a diverse country with all different cultural identities. And there are non-state actors which are really promoting and helping those cultural identities. In case there is any conflict among the identities, and how our EME is empowered to resolve those conflicts, this I want to know from you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, in the context of Mizoram, even when Mizoram was Lusai Hills district as a district of Assam, since that time, there was no election-related violence, no poll rigging, no vote capturing, and no violence at all. Because on the verge of election, church and civil society, they would appeal to the citizens. As good Christians, as good citizens of India, we have to cast our vote, but there should be no unfair means. So warning has been given to the candidates, even parties and the people also. And this continue on. And in Mizoram, the biggest church is Presbyterian Church of Mizoram. This also send appeal. Likewise, other churches also, they send appeal. Then civil societies, you may have heard about Young Mizo Association, YMA. It is the largest civil society in Mizoram. And this is also emphasizing on this regard. So on the basis of clanism, on the basis of any ism, there should be no election campaign. It should be free and fair, and there should be no unfair means. And in 2006, what I have mentioned, that Mizoram People Forum was formed by the initiative of churches and civil society. So most of the churches and civil society, they are members of this MPF. And this MPF, it is based on the Bible verse, Psalm 37 verses 1-3. Trust God and dwell in the land. That means you should be trustworthy. Then in this MPF, in coordination with election machinery, administration, and the state authority, they enforce only election model code of conduct, MCC. Then before declaration of election, then MPF signed memorandum of understanding with all representatives of political parties. Then all political parties, they agreed it. Then MPF gave vigil on all the electioneering activities, and unnecessary expenditure should not be spent. Then in every constituency, they organized public forum where all the common candidates, they participated. So it is only emphasizing MCC of the ECI. And as good, there was one CEO, and that CEO, the activity of that CEO was not at all welcomed by the civil society. So the civil society boycotted. Then election process was about to be disturbed. So the civil societies of Mizoram, they sent ultimatum to Election Commission of India. If you do not change the CEO, we will boycott election. Then ECI immediately sends the CEO. And the new CEO, he utilized that non-state actors. And because of that, election is going on full swing with peace and tranquility. That is how non-state actors are important. And it is not only in Mizoram, in other states also, I think these non-state actors should be involved and they should be utilized so that the state machinery may function properly. Thank you.
Ma'am, I have a question for Dr. Shweta, ma'am. Ma'am, according to you, what do you feel is the key towards having sustainable democracy and good governance? Because what we understand is that once we have a robust democratic system, we can ensure that there will be good governance. But what we're seeing now is that in a few countries, countries are facing anarchy because they are having issues or they have problems with the governance that is happening within that country. So how do you actually strike a balance, according to you, between sustainable democracy and good governance?
That's a tough question to answer, but one of the things that I would definitely say in the context of governance, for me, a key word is inclusivity. And I think when we're looking at inclusivity, to my mind, the whole context of intersectional constellation comes in. We've seen many presentations in the morning today, and we're looking at the whole context of the I's that we're talking about, identities. And in a democratic framework, when there is space for articulation of differing identities through an institutional process, there is a robust system of governance that gets created. Having said that, the other important element for me particularly, and I think that has been on the margins of conversation, is gender-sensitive governance mechanisms. I think the whole point of sustainable governance is also bringing in the whole context of gender to the forefront of conversations, either in the context of the substantive as well as the procedural aspects of democracy. So I think the intersections really need to be foregrounded there. Thank you.
I'll take one more question because this session is about to end at 1:15, so I don't want to delay your lunch. One or two more questions.
Yeah.
All right.
Good afternoon. I would like to interact with Dr. Shweta. You, in your presentation, as before you answer to the question, the key context that you're focusing is on inclusivity. Taking that into consideration, I just wanted to know from you, slightly deviated from your presentation, when you are talking about inclusivity, what do you think the approach of inclusivity is just limited to men and women where electoral process is concerned? And another point is that when you talk about the peace resolution, or maybe the women as a catalyst to bringing a peace, so how do you see at the local level of electoral process that women are being considered, especially the women leaders, or are there any successful stories that would like to, like when we are exchanging the ideas through this conference, what other countries should, learn from India, according to you? So far, the peace resolution of the women and inclusivity is concerned.
When I use the word inclusivity, as a feminist IR scholar, for me, the word intersectionality is extremely important. And when I say intersectionality or intersectional identities, I mean caste, class, religious ethnicity, the entire spectrum of constellations that we are talking about. So how do you actually forge frameworks, institutional mechanisms at differing levels? And when I say differing levels, state, local, state, national, regional, and international. Having said that, one of the, I think India, for instance, has a very robust mechanism in the past few years. If you've been looking at electoral practices, there has been a lot of mapping, for instance, in the context of gender representative participation across districts that we are talking about. And there are local practices that are being streamlined in that context. The third important element as part of your conversation that I would say is recognize women as agents for peace building. So, we were talking about the role of civil society, but you also have to look at what do women bring on the table. So just to give you an example, after the Good Friday Agreement was signed in the context of Northern Ireland, there was a specific mechanism that was instituted as part of the peace agreement where gender representation was a key element. Now, that's not something that is translated in differing contexts. So, for instance, if we look at Nepal, we have the comprehensive peace agreement that was signed in the year 2000, and the question of gender equality was an important part. But did it translate into gender quotas? So, those kind of critical questions comes in. And I would actually be a little more provocative here and say that it's not that gender quotas essentially translate into gender transformative justice. That comes as part of the governance frameworks that we were talking about, or as parts of sustainable governance frameworks that we're talking about. So I think these are all intertwined. And I think it's important for us to pay attention to an interconnected web in the context of translation of these democratic norms across the scales that we are talking about. So thank you.
Question from here.
Hello, panelists. Thank you so much. I'm Atiyar Singh. I'm ECI panel counsel in the Meghalaya High Court. My question is for the two professors, actually. As you're aware, our region has been suffering from insurgency for a very long time. How do you feel our democratic process has been different from the rest of mainland India and the challenges associated particularly with our region? Thank you.
It's a very interesting question, even though it's a little bit out of the text. Let me just briefly talk about the whole reason. As you know, we come from the Northeast, and then it's all about the insurgency, then conflict. It's all about. But when it comes to the electoral process, it's very interesting. I don't know whether we are allowed to say everything or not. I don't know. But if since the question comes in, but there are places where elections are held, but casted by only one gentleman. I've come across, I traveled by foot in 2004 Lok Sabha election, in the entire part where I have to travel by foot for 12 hours to have a survey of elections by one of the Delhi-based institute. And I come to know that that entire hill range around, around 10 polling stations, by one gentleman of the village chief used to cast a vote. Because they are asked to cast a vote by a particular insurgent organization for a particular candidate. It too happens. That's one of the scenario. Anyone?
Let me supplement a little bit as he addressed to two of us. So as my colleague has just said now, Northeast is insurgency prone area, particularly right now, Manipur, Nagaland also to some extent, Assam, then Meghalaya and Arunachal, they are free, but more or less they are disturbed from time to time from cross-border insurgency. And Tripura also. And in the context, I'll go to the context of Mizoram. In the context of Mizoram, even during insurgency from 1966 to 1986, the peculiar thing about Mizoram was that even during that time, insurgents did not involve in electoral politics. They never disturbed election process. They were not involved in election process, and free voting and free and fair campaign, all those were not disturbed even during that time in the context of Mizoram. And mainly this was due to the involvement and contribution of the churches. In this regard, the contribution of the church is praiseworthy. And as I've said, I just mentioned a little bit earlier, which led also to the formation of MPF, which is functioning actively now. And this MPF also has been acknowledged by the ECI because it is only enforcing the ECI. And due to that, it depends upon the places. So it varies, and the impact also varies, so to say. It is not uniform.
Let us conclude this session with the belief that democracy, with its principle of diversity and inclusivity, is the best form of government for having a peaceful coexistence amongst diversity. Thank you all. Thanks to all the speakers and to the participants for their thoughtful engagement. Thank you all. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Starting the validation.
What I wanted to ask is